Around the age of 40, a man's testosterone starts to decline. And this really isn't a bad thing unless it's like an off the charts decline. But what this does mean is that since there's this intimate link between dopamine and testosterone, so dopamine being the neuromodulator of motivation, of like not having something and really, really, really wanting it and producing a lot of drive to externally take action in the world and go and get that thing. So it's almost like a constant state of agitation in which, when you actually arrive at that thing, dopamine stops being produced for that thing. And you would think that you would get this like shot of feel good biochemicals in your body, but that's not the case. You then set another site somewhere in the future, and dopamine keeps going. So, the relationship between dopamine and testosterone is that they go hand in hand. So, the higher testosterone levels you have, the higher dopamine levels you have, and vice versa. And so, for I would say most men, a lot, if not all, of their identity gets wrapped up in what are they achieving? Where are they going? And what I've heard from a lot of men is that they are constantly moving towards a goal and seeking happiness at the same time. However, as you have probably experienced, like I was talking about with the dopamine reference before, once you arrive at the goal, you don't necessarily become happy because happy is actually more of a present state. It's more of a heart centered emotion. It's more of a different like function of your biology in which you are actually here now present and enjoying via your five senses and your emotional body what actually surrounds you. So it requires presence, whereas that dopamine testosterone link is not really presence. It's I seek something in the future and I go after it and I get it. So anyways, so a man's identity is largely wrapped up in going after and getting something. However, around the age of 40, a man's testosterone starts to decline. Again, not a problem, but when this happens, his dopamine declines as well. And so a lot of men, I would say starting at age 40, but definitely at age 50, people call it a midlife crisis. I don't think of it as a midlife crisis. The way that I think about it is that there's actually a shift in awareness via a biochemical shift in their body. And so while they've been driving towards something in the future, that drive like isn't as strong. And so it's around this time that a lot of men go out and seek novelty. They seek newness. Why? Because novelty and newness will spike your dopamine, but only for a period of time, only for about 21 days roughly. But if a man is so used to deriving his pleasure, deriving his identity from going out and getting something, from having the external wins provide him with more motivation, then when all of that starts to decline, he's left with the presence of what is in his body, what is in his subconscious. And he's really face to face with like, what's going on for him here and now, right? Not in the future, not in the past, but here and now, that is blocking his heartfelt presence, his emotional engagement with the world and with himself, and especially with his relationships. And this is really where shadow work becomes very, very useful for this man who's feeling lost, who's maybe seeking novelty, who just went through a divorce, or who went through a divorce a while ago, but then poured into his career and is now kind of at this place where, maybe you're really successful, you don't feel a lot of drive in your career, but you don't know who you are anymore. You feel lost. This is where shadow work is extremely useful. So for this man who has reached this place in his life where there's maybe not a whole lot of drive or just less drive than before to go out and go conquer the world, what is he supposed to do? Well, again, this is where shadow work becomes really, really useful because shadow work is actually just bringing your awareness. So, bringing your presence. I like to think of awareness like a flashlight. So, you're bringing your flashlight and you're pointing it inward at the places in your body and in your mind and in your emotional state and in your heart that are blocked by pain, that are blocked by what I like to think of as a sense of contraction, because there's really only two states of the universe. There's either expansion or there's contraction, and contraction usually doesn't feel good. So, contractive quality emotions would be like grief, would be depression, would be hopelessness, despair, anger. Actually, anger is a little bit higher up than both of those. Fear, sadness, loneliness. So, all of these things that are actually biochemically and neurologically happening in the body that have probably been happening in your body for a really, really, really long time, but have not been looked at by the light of your awareness, are just sort of getting bigger. They're getting louder, but they're not necessarily getting louder because they came out of nowhere. They're getting louder because your presence is not naturally as focused on where am I going, right? You have lower dopamine, you have lower testosterone. It's not at all a bad thing. But what it does is it highlights the pain that you've been ignoring your whole life. And if you're still listening after that statement, I commend you, because a lot of men, they hear that and they go, I don't want to do that. I don't want to face that type of pain. I don't want to look at it. I think a lot of men fear, at least what they've told me, is they fear that if they touch it, if they look at it, if they open it, they'll get sucked in, they'll get lost in it, they won't know what to do with it. It'll be too overwhelming for them. Oftentimes, too, it's marked by a lot of shame, because unfortunately, all of us were raised in a shame-based society and environment. And so to whatever extent that you picked up on shame is to the extent of avoidance, that you don't want to look at the shit that you've been harboring your entire life. And it's all good shit, by the way. None of it's bad. It just needs that flashlight on it. And so anyways, the more shame that there is, the more you're going to quite literally feel like you want to move away from it. And the more you're going to seek the alternative route of trying to create something in the future, or trying to create something in your career, trying to create something externally, trying to chase women, trying to chase drugs, alcohol, sex, porn, all the things that, we can kind of get wrapped up in to avoid this shadow self. So, what I am suggesting through a series of techniques that I have is that you take your flashlight and you willingly, you consciously say, I, with my free will, I'm going to take my flashlight, I'm going to look at what this is. Because the reality is that whatever is there, even if it's shame, embarrassment, trauma, stuff from your childhood that you've never shared with anybody, that is somewhere locked back in your memory banks, or maybe even beyond your memory banks, and you don't even remember, but it's all there, you won't actually get lost in it. It's actually just a feeling. It's just a feeling. And all a feeling is like information running through your nervous system. And so the way that I like to explain uncomfortable sensations in the body, I don't believe any of them are bad. I think actually all of them have a reason for being there, is that every single uncomfortable, okay, feeling that you feel, this is all shadow work, contains gold within the middle. Okay, so if you have an uncomfortable feeling, right, first we need to understand that a feeling is held in the body, right? If you were to go up on stage and present something, you might feel nervous. And if I were to be there with you and I'd be like, hey, where do you feel the nervousness in your body? You could actually take your hand and you could point to it. You could be like, oh, I feel it here. It feels like a fluttering, or you can't see me, but it's like here, it's down in my belly. It feels like butterflies in my stomach. Or if you've ever been through a breakup, you can actually take your hand and you can be like, right, I feel physical pain in my chest and my heart. So feelings are felt in the body. They're not felt in the mind. We can label them via the English language or whatever language you speak, but they're actually felt in the body. And that's really what a feeling is. Again, it's that neurological input that is waving a little red flag saying, hey, there's information here. Humans are roughly, if not more than this, 7 times more likely to look at a negative sensation than a positive sensation. Why? We are hardwired that way for our survival. The example I like to use for that one is that you're in a forest clearing, and off to one side, you have your very favorite dessert, and it's perfect, and it's right there off to your left, and it looks so yummy, and you're about to go eat it, and then a tiger jumps out at you from the right side. And if you freeze frame that and we look at that and we say, well, what are you naturally going to do? Well, you're going to prioritize the fear. You're going to prioritize the uncomfortable sensation, completely block out your favorite dessert, and you're actually going to engage in a biological process of saving your life because you value life. So the information encoded in fear is survival. It's I value life. I value my body. I am a self-loving creature. I will self-preserve. By pushing, blood flow to my extremities to run from the tiger. Okay. So every single emotion that you feel is there for you. Emotions are felt in the body. So when you go through this process of shadow work, you bring your awareness into your body and you ask, like, well, what is it that I'm actually feeling? Where do I actually feel that sensation? And when you bring your awareness there, you start to unpack it. You start to understand, why is that feeling there? What is the red flag waving of that feeling? So the uncomfortable sensation is like the bubble wrap. You unwrap the bubble wrap by bringing your awareness to it, and you will always, always, every single time, without exception, find in the middle of that bubble wrap is gold. So the gold is either one of three things. It's either a repressed truth or desire, an unmet need, or a boundary. The gold is obviously quite important to your presence, to being here and now. Because if you can imagine, let's say you had an unavailable mother and an overly critical father, you had all of these unmet needs as a child. We're going way back to childhood here. And you grew up creating this neural network of like, well, I need to perform really, really well, get really good grades so that I can get the love that I need to grow up, and I can push away the criticism from my father figure. And I'm making the story up, could be a million different things, right? But you start to create this neural network around your needs. And so if your need, let's say as a child, is to be vulnerably loved and to express your needs in an open way, it's a need of affection, it's a need of vulnerability, it's a need of admiration, it's a need of relational safety, but it's marked by you creating a personality mask of like, hey, as a child, right? These needs are not getting met. And so I'm going to form a personality mask that I'm hyper independent, that I can do all the things completely by myself. I don't need other people. And I'm going to basically bubble wrap all of my relational, emotional needs, all of my presence with the uncomfortable sensation of shame. Maybe you were shamed for having those needs, and then you shove it way the back in your neurology. Now, we don't do this consciously, you do this subconsciously. You're not aware that it's happening, but it is happening. And so you can imagine that that's happened so many times throughout your life where you have all of this gold shoved to the periphery of your subconscious. It's wrapped in, some of them are wrapped in shame. Some of them are wrapped in guilt. Some of them are wrapped in grief. Some of them are wrapped in loneliness, despair, anger, all of these things. And they just exist here, but they're outside of your periphery. And you can live a lot of your life as a man not even paying attention to that, not even knowing that, because you have so much testosterone, so much dopamine keeping you externally focused. See where this is all coming together? So if you're externally focused, you're not looking at this, but then what happens? Right around 40, right around 50, maybe 55, your external focus naturally wanes, and this information from your subconscious gets louder and louder and louder and louder and louder and louder until all of a sudden you're like, shit, I actually can't ignore this anymore. And you might find yourself thinking or feeling things like, I don't feel like myself anymore. I don't feel as engaged with my life anymore. I'm not as happy in relationships anymore. I don't like my body or my career or my life. I feel lost. Okay, I hear this all the time from this age group. So the indication here is shadow work, taking your flashlight of your awareness, pointing it towards what have you shoved in, because you'll find, and this is the really beautiful thing, you'll find that as you bring light to these subconscious patterns, you unwrap the discomfort. That's the only uncomfortable part, is just unwrapping it. But when you get to the gold, there's expansion, because all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, here's a piece of my authenticity. Here's another piece of my authenticity. Here's another piece of gold. Oh, here's a boundary I didn't know I had. Here's a desire. Here's a repressed truth. And now all of a sudden you gather all of this gold, you weave that gold into the fabric of who you are and who you're becoming, and you emerge as the man you were truly meant to be. Okay, this is like the hero's journey of the man. And one of the very, very pivotal steps for a man on his hero's journey is when he's, slayed all the things externally and the dragons and the this and the that, there comes a time when he is invited into his internal kingdom. He doesn't have to walk through that door. You don't have to walk through that door. The hero can leave the door. The hero can completely avoid the door. He didn't have to walk through the door. But when a hero chooses to walk through that door, what he is blessed with is beyond what words can describe, because it's his truth, it's his masculine essence, it's who he is, it's color, it's art, it's his heart. It comes alive in him and through his eyes, and he can be the living, breathing embodiment of everything that he's pushed away for so long. So there's a freedom in that. There's a presence in that, because without all of this subconscious information, you can actually truly be present. You can truly be in your eyes. You can truly be in your body. You can truly be in the good stuff of life. You can truly be present with your partner. You can truly be present with yourself. You can truly be present with your children. You can truly be present in what you're doing here and now. It's the subconscious information that we talked about that's uncomfortable that takes you out of presence. And so what my invitation for you is to go ahead and watch my free men's masterclass, Unleash Your Masculinity, because that's going to walk you through the 3 very important steps of shadow work specifically for a man, so that you don't get stuck in like this feminine way of just like emoting and expressing emotions. You go in, you get the gold, and then you go out, but you become somebody different in the process. Thank you for watching. Make sure you subscribe, like my channel, all the good things, and I will see you soon.